Tonight's talk is an example of something that I've been working on with the fragmented and sprawling teachings of Theosophy, the ancient wisdom. And that word is synthesis. Synthesis, how we bring together the strands of what we're learning. Madame Blavatsky once said, I think it was towards the end of her time, that she published all her books at the time, and she said to one of her confidants, there's enough information out there to make all of them masters in this life, but they lack the ability to synthesize what they've been given. And I found this idea of synthesis very, very useful. And so tonight we're going to look at my attempted, and a lot of this is suggested as well, the synthesis of the ancient wisdom, as we can see the bigger picture, right the way from the monad, spirit, down to the personality, matter, and the idea that science has got a lot to learn yet, but is making steps in a number of directions, expanding our consciousness away from sense-orientated matters. And then I'll further synthesize a little bit of astrology into that as well. And so hopefully you'll be able to see the sheet that Gary and Damon have put together for you tonight, or I put together, and they're displaying it, and I'll be going through that. But there's a lot more to tell you than what's on that sheet. But I do want to start with another quote from Madame Blavatsky, writing in The Secret Doctrine, Volume 1, page 70, and you've got a précis of it up there, but I'm going to give you the full quote. According to the tenets of Eastern occultism, darkness is the one true actuality, the basis of root of light, without which the latter light could never manifest itself nor even exist. Light is matter, she said, and darkness is pure spirit. Darkness, in its radical metaphysical basis, is subjective, while the latter, in all its seeming effulgence and glory, is merely a mass of shadows, as it can never be eternal, and is simply an illusion or maya. And what she was referring to there is that if we step back and take the bigger picture, which is what I'm going to attempt to suggest and expound this evening, we must move well beyond the soul and this idea of the forces of darkness and the forces of light, as if that was all it was about. The battle between the materialistic forces of personality drives for the selfish against the beautiful and gentle light of the soul. Yes, it's a stage of development, but it's not the bigger picture. And it seems to be emerging that we've got to go much further than the darkness of ignorance, or the darkness of not illumination, or the darkness of evil, if you like, the dark forces that are talked about, to this purer, deeper darkness that Madame Blavatsky has referred to. And I have found a lot of seed thoughts in Madame Blavatsky's work over the years, which have lent to some kind of expansion. And I did this in a series of talks called Golden Nuggets of the Secret Doctrine, all 3 volumes, that is, that I've given out to Theosophy. And this is just one of those nuggets, where on steady meditation of the seed of what's been said, then if you have the material in your mind that is previously unsynthesized, meditation on the seed thought that links them can bring all these matters together into something reasonably coherent, which I hope this comes across to tonight. So let's get into the matter of this, having given the umbrella overview of what I'm looking at, and we'll see what comes out of it. Theosophy holds that there is one life beyond all definition and approach, and we are that. But the one reality cannot be symbolized, for it lies beyond duality. It lies beyond the understanding of manifest and unmanifest, or Manvantara and Pralaya. What can be symbolized is our current approach to divinity, which in Theosophy is by way of the monad, or the life aspect of the human being. And I've covered section 1 already on the print that you have in front of you. It's important that we do see, as this bigger picture, the understanding of the 3 phases of evolution, as I have listed them there, and there's the colors as well. In green at the bottom, we have correspondences to the earth through personality. That is the symbol for the earth, the circle with the cross in it. And what Alice Bailey called fire by friction. She said this is the fire of matter, and is what we call rotary in nature. And then we move up in the blue to a symbol of the sun, but the sun is in fact threefold as well. But let's talk about the sun as we understand light and brightness, and the soul symbolized by the sun there, which is the circle with the dot in it in astrology. And this is symbolized or explained by solar fire, which Madam Alice Bailey said was cyclical and spiral, both those together, a cyclical spiral kind of going up like that in nature. And this is the energy of consciousness. And it is in fact a blend of the first aspect, which we'll get to now. I'll mention black hole later. Let's just keep with monad and theosophy, electric fire, and this third aspect, which I've just mentioned, which is the life aspect. And it's interesting that I've been doing some talks in the last year or two on the Antakarana, or rainbow bridge. And this fits beautifully into this model that we've got here at section 2. Because there are 3 threads of energy. One thread of energy is called the life thread. The second thread is the consciousness thread. And the life thread does in fact run from the monad to the heart. And the thymus gland is involved. The idea that we are kept alive by this thread in conjunction with a consciousness thread, which runs from the soul to the cortex of the brain. And for physical death to occur, both of those threads have to be severed. We often get the sad situation of somebody being kept alive on a ventilator whose consciousness thread has been broken, but the life thread is still there or is being kept going, and the heart and the lungs are being kept going. And those 2 threads we have to take as a given. We're not in charge of creating those threads. They're done for us by higher agencies, the monad and the soul, as explained. But the Antakarana, of course, is the creative thread built by us upwards towards those other 2. And that's the personality's job, to be creative in this life and to be able to bridge the gap in not knowing that we've got this spiritual or not being 100% certain we've got this spiritual principle within us. We work towards it either with faith in religions or with perhaps knowledge and intuition through theosophy and such subjects concerning the ancient wisdom. And so we see there is a triangle of energies here. And it seems, of course, that there are schools which have concentrated almost entirely on the second aspect there. And in fact, the very important building of that Antakarana, which I've thrown in as a bit of an extra because it kind of fits so well. It wasn't part of the talk, but it kind of fits so well for us to know that we have to be creative. And when I say creative, I should just say it means in a particular incarnation, we have to open knowledge petals or love petals or sacrifice petals, which is something to do with our own point of evolution, where we are on the path and what we're going to do with our time and our energy in this life. When we have given up just creating reaction capacities in physical, emotional, and mental matter, it seems that the mass of people out there in the world are satisfied with their personality life. And if it's their point on the path, that's perfectly acceptable, of course, to them to not be involved in building the Antakarana, but they are just getting their numbers of lives with physical, emotional, and mental responses and reactions. So they build those capacities which we bring forward in each and every life. And of course, we didn't all start out at the same time. There were the avatars that went first and became the Christs and the Buddhas as we understand it, and the masters of the wisdom have stayed in the precincts of the earth like those avatars did at some stage to help struggling humanity. And we are struggling with understanding all of this and trying to put it all together. So when I said the approach to divinity, which in theosophy is by way of the monad, I'm referring to the red line there, the life aspect that goes along the top. According to Judo Krishnamurti, the way of spirit, he called it a pathless path. He said it is not a way of knowing, but it is being the way. It is being the way. We become the way. We become the path. We become that link between what we do as our personality and how our higher spiritual members dictate to us what to do. And it is a dictation. We have to give up. We have to give up all thought of what Ted Capstick thinks about it. And I've met a lot of people in this work over the number of years that I've done it. And sadly, I find that people cherry pick what they like about something. Yeah, I like that. Yeah, I agree. Oh, I don't agree with that. We've got to take out our likes and our dislikes and go for truth, naked truth, and not have too many ideas about it ourselves. That's the way I feel progress can be made. Now, the symbol I would like to use for this monadic approach to divinity is the symbol of the black hole. And I've put that up there because we understand the earth and we understand the sun, but we don't really understand the black hole. Very, very briefly, a black hole is a region of space in which gravity is so strong that not even light can escape from it. There are two types of black hole, and I'll mention that a little bit later on because I want to talk about the black hole at the center of the galaxy shortly. So yes, this is meant to stretch the mind a bit as it did as I put this information, some of which I've received intuitively in deep meditation and other of which I've researched. And I think science is doing better than a lot of people think with the advent of quantum physics and the extension of astrophysics, both of which are important to tonight's talk. But I mustn't get too distracted. But the emergence of the black hole into human consciousness, I believe, is a revolutionary event, which is more than casually related to the adoption of the heliocentric theory, the idea that the sun is at the center of all things. Let's look at this. The sun has long been the symbol for the human soul. But once the heliocentric approach was adopted, and before that, we had the idea of the earth, the geocentric approach. In those early days with the geocentric approach, the center of the universe seemed to be the earth. The sun or the soul was subsidiary. There was not much thinking or understanding about the soul. But once the heliocentric or sun-centered approach was adopted, then the sun moved to a greater degree of scrutiny, and I believe the Enlightenment truly began. And I call this the solarization of the earth. The solarization of the Earth may still be in progress. We are still trying to lift the Earth from a third-rate personality where the Earth members are very, very strong in active intelligence. We look at what we've created on the Earth and the way we've adapted to circumstances, and the technology and the inventions that we have shows a wonderful mind at work. And that is exactly what the humanity was meant to do with its time here. But the solarization includes putting a spiritual or soul principle into that particular work, which is bringing the second ray of love wisdom in, and an element of heart to be fused with and work with the mind or the head. And this is the case with all spiritual work. We need a fusion. Ourselves, we may be at the point of working on our head centers and our will, our strength of will, or we be making on our heart centers and our love. And that's fine, because we've done the other ones in previous lives. And so we may well be attracted to the heart approach or the mental and the will approach. But in truth, we have to synthesize them. We have to bring them together towards the latter stages of the path, so that we are able to display all the capacities of a spiritual human being. Remember, we talk sometimes a little bit glibly about Atma, Buddhi, Manas. Atma will, Buddhi love, Manas mind. They're all important. All the qualities I called of the spiritual triad, they're all important, and we're probably good at one of them and we're trying to be good at another one, but we need all three. And those three there, the Atma, Buddhi, Manas, is beautifully aligned to section 2 there, where Atma would be the monad, Buddhi would be the soul, and personality would be the mind. Yes, the appreciation of solar qualities, such as those of the Renaissance, and anything where we have works of beauty, and we can look at this beauty in such a way that it does something to our heart. And so there is this idea of shifting our consciousness into the soul, so that humanity itself will become a soul-infused kingdom on earth, rather than an earthly kingdom which the soul circles. So there we are. You can imagine the sun circling the earth. Well, the solarization process is that we reach up and grab the light of the soul and we bring it into the life of the planet. And that's the problem the planet is going through at the moment. We're too mentally oriented. We're not bringing in the light of the soul to the extent that we care about all kingdoms and all races or all religions or whatever. And it is that particular solarization process that I understand is linked to the externalization of the hierarchy and the reappearance of the Christ. This is their task, aided by the new group of world servers and anybody else who is of good intention for right attitude, right understanding, right human relationships, etc., will join with these soon to be, we understand it, externalized masters, and make this fusion on the earth the part of the divine plan that it was always intended to be. And that's another talk in itself. I want to return now to Judo Krishnamurti, who'd been designated the vehicle for the coming world teacher, who renounced this role in 1927, disbanded the Order of the Star that had been established to facilitate the mission, and began teaching his pathless path. And he said, the answers are within you. Krishnamurti's spiritual name was Alcyone, Alcyone, which is in fact a star in the Pleiades. This star has come to be associated in spiritual thought with a central sun around which our whole solar system turns. And this tradition was repeated in The Secret Doctrine and Alice Bailey's treatise on cosmic fire. And that is the idea then that we've got the earth and the sun, and then some other point at which the solar system itself is revolving around. I'm going to come to that point with the black hole at the center of our galaxy very shortly. So we've got this idea, this threefold idea. Let's just take a step back before we get into too much detail, just so we don't move away from the theme of darkness too quickly. Clues have been left throughout time, in particular through the experiential traditions of the mystics. This is very much a talk of the occult. The occultist, and I will class myself as a student occultist, is one who's working from the bottom upwards, who's working with objectivity to give objective names to experiences in the subjective worlds. Now, not just experiences at a spiritual level. We can have a good or a bad emotional experience. That's subjective. We can't put it into words, and we don't understand why we're so upset or whatever it might be, or traumatized. And the occultists are like the scientists. They're working bottom up. The mystic wants to go straight there, wants to go straight back to home. And they have come up with terms that they talk about: the dark night of the soul, divine darkness, the darkness of pure spirit, the dark light of Shambhala, as they've experienced it. But all of these expressions do refer, in my view, to a realized shift from expansion of the soul to identification with the monad. And so the monad lying behind the soul is consciousness, we have it there, but the monad is life. Where does the energy of consciousness itself come from? It is a blend of the monad or spirit aspect with the matter aspect of number 3. So number 2, or the soul, solar fire, is a blend of electric fire and fire by friction. And this brings in the idea of Kundalini. Kundalini, lying, sleeping at the base of the spine, is understood to be the negative polarity or fire by friction, and can only safely be raised when all of the chakras in between where she lays at the root and where the excitement or stimulation comes from the crown center, is when she hears electric fire from the monad coming in at the 3rd initiation, and with its positive polarity, she hears the roar of her mate, and she stirs and hisses and starts to rise up Sushumna, the central tract in the etheric body. And it can only be done safely if all those chakras, and most of us have blocked chakras somewhere, we might be working on this one or that one, and it's only at the 3rd initiation can that actually happen. Again, a bit of a side point, but interestingly enough, because that's when the identification shifts. And it is an identification. Do you identify yourself with matter? Do you identify yourself with something less tangible than matter, which is consciousness? And that's good because you're at the soul level. If you do, the next level is to identify yourself with the life energy. And, you know, we can talk in terms of science, but it's becoming fairly clear to me that the soul has got a correspondence and a link to magnetism, and that electric fire has got a link to, obviously, electricity. And Madame Blavatsky wrote a lot about the mystery of electricity, and I think it is quite definitely corresponding and linking to the life aspect. Now, there are other outer symbols in the cosmos that allow this inner experience to come into a more tangible way into our collective consciousness. I'm going to suggest that black holes, dark matter, and dark energy are all potent symbols for the spiritual life. And when I say the spiritual life, I'm talking about the red level now. I'm talking about going beyond the soul. and therefore can serve as a framework for understanding this life aspect and the Shambhala center it is. Now, if we are aware of the great invocation and we use that prayer, we know that Shambhala is referred to, and it's referred to in great detail in the Alice Bailey works, the center where the will of God is known. Okay, so hierarchy is the center where the love of God emanates from, but behind that even further is Shambhala, the center where the will of God is known. And so we've got here Shambhala, will, hierarchy, love, and humanity, active intelligence. And the black hole is not a source of light and consciousness, which is the second aspect there, but for us, it's of darkness and mystery. My view is it can be thought of being a center of being where the knower and the knowing are one. This idea we talk about in Theosophy, the ancient wisdom, about non-dual states, the oneness or the samadhi of the mystic in some heightened yogic expression. The sounding of the Om, the all-inclusive Om, is bringing us to something. But we do know that there's a certain, in our understanding of black holes, there's a certain oneness about it all, because nothing exists in any differentiated form as far as we know. And therefore, at this stage in our development, my view is it's a good symbol, where the knower and the knowing are one. Now, all great teachers, as great souls, seek to ignite the solar fire, that's the consciousness aspect, in their pupils, so that the pupils themselves express their solar nature. But then, having expressed the solar nature, it's the evolutionary urge, if you like, the evolutionary impulse to take that further and to realize that they also have a common, I'll call it dark center, around which they have to make a further identification there. So realized sonship, and we can spell that S-O-N, because that duality is also the Trinity of the Christian faith. That's Father, Son, and Holy Spirit, if you like, as well. Realized sonship, so that can be Sun, S-O-N, but we've also got the Sun in there as a planet, so it can be S-U-N. Realized sonship is the goal of the path up until the third degree initiation, So what I'm purporting to do with this is say, let's look beyond yes, we are working, most of us, between the first and second, or the second and third initiation, and the third initiation is going to be massive for us in whichever lifetime we're able to achieve it. But beyond that, there is the fourth initiation. And it's interesting that in my study of Christian theology, something that I have been looking at very carefully, we understand that unlike the reappearance of the Christ in the life that we may see, or lives to come that we may see, when there will be a full reappearance, we have to understand that Jesus too was an initiate, and that he came in as a third degree initiate and took the third degree initiation on the Mount of Olives. And it's referred to in the Bible as the Transfiguration. And I've meditated on this because I'm very interested, and you may be interested as well, because there's plenty of biblical literature for you to do this with. And then you would get to the crucifixion, and we find out that it was the fourth initiation of renunciation. And it's quite clear in all the work that's written, whether it be Blavatsky, whether it be Bailey, or whether it be Leadbeater or Besant or whoever, that the fourth initiation is the initiation of renunciation, where it is said we are completely left alone in consciousness, as Jesus was on the cross. And the testimony is, of course, the words that he cried out from the cross, attesting to that of being left completely alone. So we're talking, when we talk about the life aspect, beyond the third initiation. And it's called transfiguration because the soul is then in charge of the personality to such an extent that the two don't exist as separate entities anymore. It is a soul-infused personality, and the personality works for spiritual principles in the way that Jesus of Nazareth in the last 3-4 years of his life after that transfiguration worked totally for the people that he was working around, the Jews and the Gentiles at the time. But at that time, this is the time when we're moving beyond the third initiation. The monad is playing a more dynamic part in the individual's evolution. And I'm saying that we can look at this. We may be on the path to the third initiation, but we can look at this as an expansion of consciousness to come, and we can synthesize it into our consciousness as well, because the individual has to be completely freed from its misidentification with form, and that is the role of the soul. Thereafter, it begins to free the monad begins to free the indwelling spirit from the triadal sheaths of Atma Buddhi Manas. And so we see that Atma Buddhi Manas is a ladder which we have to climb in order to reach the monad. Manas at the lowest level, abstract thoughts, Buddhi at the middle level, the question and the path of the heart, and then Atma, the will of the soul, the will of Shambhala. In the Lord's Prayer, not my will, but thy will be done. That's a big stage. That's the 5th step of adepthood, where there is nothing for the self. Well, it's not a separated self anymore. It's a soul-infused self, but there's nothing for it. And that consciousness is just on the path of whatever the Father wishes, whatever the, and again, Christ, Jesus saying in the Bible, I must be about my Father's business. Great symbolic words, symbolic imagery, and why I've been pulled to look at some of the wondrous things that are actually said in the New Testament, which a lot of Christians may just have not got the depth of it. So, or Christians I speak to haven't yet got the depth of it, which I find absolutely compelling. And so this latter process of moving the consciousness away from the third initiation completes with our identification with Atma at the 5th degree, when the initiate becomes a master in the 5 worlds below and realizes his essential identity as the monad, the one. And the 5 worlds below are, of course, physical, emotional, mental, where you add the lower and the higher together, Manas, Buddhi, and Atma. And so I think it's helpful when we're on the path, not just to see the point of the path that we're on, but to see what is lying ahead, insofar as we can put together those pieces of wisdom in a synthetic way, which is our aim tonight. Now, human consciousness has found a way, in my view, to break out of its prison by penetrating in both directions thought, the very small and the very large. And section 3 would have been a handout if we were physical. But there we are. You can see there the earth and the participants of the earth with their human consciousness penetrating in 2 completely opposite directions, penetrating into the very small. Quantum physics is only 120 years old. Somebody said to me, why are you trying to weave it into the ancient wisdom? We know all about it now. I said, I don't think we do know all about it. It's in its very embryo form of matter, but it's moving from esoteric to exoteric. And of course, what quantum physics is doing is saying there are subtler states of matter than we thought. I think with the likes of Newton and Galileo, they all thought that, the only thing that was tangible was these particles. And now we are understanding about waves. much more so. And the opposite direction is to penetrate it. So one is micro with quantum physics, and the other is macro into astrophysics, the world of black holes. And I've spent many years studying quantum physics, and I've now started to look into the idea of extending my consciousness in the direction of the macro world, which is why my interest in black holes and why I'm using this as a particular symbol. As I say, a lot of what I'm saying tonight is suggestion, but it's suggestion based on a certain degree, as I perceive it, of synthesis. And in doing that, we have found a world of energy and abstraction, because consciousness has released itself from the sensory forms of matter. We're not dealing with the 5 gross senses here when we study and look into and research quantum physics or astrophysics. This is the beauty of extending our consciousness into worlds which have not normally been available for most people. Now, I believe that when we do this, there's a fusion of consciousness and reflected in the individualized consciousness of the disciple. The disciple has made a decision to discipline him or herself to a number of ideas, which can be meditation, they can be a study, there'll be service to mankind as well, but that's in the outer worlds. But in the inner worlds, what I'm talking about particularly here, there is this very important matter of focus. If we learn to focus our consciousness, it's going to be very strong energetically. And that's what I'm suggesting that these 2 disciplines have done and are doing for me. Remember, it's tough because we've struggled for so long to establish our true identity as a soul through disidentification with the 3 worlds of personality. Now there's a new reorientation required, where he has to seek out that which is at the root of both the soul and the personality alike, which is the monad. So the disciple, struggling to identify himself with what we call the angel of the shining presence, and to reject the dweller on the threshold, is something I've talked about a lot over the years. And if you like, in a simpler sense, we have to deal with our shadow self. And a lot of people's stage on the path is just doing that, dealing with the negative aspects of their personality, which is a precursor to doing any of this advanced work. I'm trying to build the whole big picture, and I'm bringing in the dweller now to say that maybe we've all got to do it at some stage. And according to the Bailey teachings, you're only faced with the dweller. In other words, the demons come out of the closet from the unconscious into consciousness, and we're required to go through a cathartic process so that we can deal with those demons. They only raise themselves when we're on the path of discipleship, because we've said to our souls then, I'm committed to this spiritual development. Be careful what you wish for, because when that does happen, you accelerate your evolution. And that means facing the dweller on the threshold. And the dweller can be heavy, and I see it to different extents in the charts of people around soul's purpose and the 8th house in particular. So we have to understand about this dweller on the threshold. It can hold us back, and it's usually built around the negative aspects of fear and desire. And I would say the planetary dweller on the threshold has certainly been brought to the surface by the incident of the COVID virus, because everyone has made their own existential reaction to what they think about it, what they fear about it, and the same with the vaccines as well. These things have brought out things that if it hadn't come along, then we would be perhaps carrying on in the same old ways and not realize that we were carrying around all sorts of fears and phobias with us. And somebody asked me a question about how evil was the virus. And if we really believe in the one life, then that virus is part of the one life. And is that virus just not trying to survive when it attacks human beings? And is that not what we're trying to do as human beings? And it seems to me that a lot of people who are saying they're interested in the wisdom have still got a terrible fear about something which is part of the one life. And we really do have to join our thinking up together on this matter as we try and understand what's going on. If we're totally personality orientated, we are going to have difficulties with it. And a lot of people, and I've spoken to a lot of people about it, are having that difficulty. And so the disciple is necessarily challenged, because we've had something like 500 or 600 lives on the path when we've not been spiritual. And my understanding from the inner worlds is that the soul has great difficulty in pulling together an integrated personality to work without fear and personal desire, because this dweller is massive, absolutely massive. And so it has to be broken down in chunks and in components. And one of the big things that I've had to face in my life is the loss of a loved one, because I got too attached emotionally. And then I got too attached to security. So a job and a career was taken away from me suddenly, in almost exactly the same way as the person. And we look at our own lives and we'll see that if we are on the path of discipleship, these things will happen to us. And then there's the health issues I've had as well. And so all of these things are teaching us to deal with our fears so that we can embrace something of this later stage of the path, which I'm suggesting here. But if we're going to look at the bigger picture, we've also got to look at the more troublesome end for us as personalities. And we're all at different stages in that. So the disciple, first of all, leaves the dark world of matter to seek out and identify with the world of light and the soul. He engages in the great battle between the lords of light and the lords of materiality. Victory achieved, he now is required to seek that which lies behind the dual existence of soul and personality, which has engrossed them for so many lives. The disciple seeks to know the purpose behind the play of light and dark, and draws close to that which cannot be known, but only touched for a moment. Paul's lightning flash on the path of Damascus is an idea of the touch of electric fire, which converted him in an instant. And it is said that the planet Uranus, which we'll see shortly, is responsible for this touch of fire, which any of us experience if we're needed to be given a little bit of a jolt in a certain direction. And it can transform us, as it did indeed transform Paul. So a relationship is needed to be established with that higher center of darkness, the darkness of pure spirit. My understanding is the light of the soul will burn more brightly when that brightness is fed by the higher darkness, so that the lower darkness of matter is fully illumined and begins to glow with solar fire. And so the whole thing is a thread. The electric fire has provided the illumination of the soul, and it's the illumination of the soul onto matter, which then brings that forth as a solarized entity in its own right. And so we look now at the spiritual journey as being the path from form to the light behind the form to the darkness behind the light. And that's the journey which is upwards from green to red. Now, as science understands it, matter today consists of 75% dark energy, 21% dark matter, and 4%, this is science, 4% of all the visible and measurable matter, including light and the forms of human beings. And so my understanding of the synthesis is that dark energy is the energetic substrate of the universe. The energetic substrate of the universe. Everything else is a modified form of that basic energy, just as the soul and the personality are modifications of the primary monad as we go down. Dark energy and dark matter are, I believe, a dual expression of one underlying reality. Dark energy, then, an expression of a universal fluid that generates motion, is ultimately responsible for the speed of light, the spiraling of galaxies, and the spin of the electron. But dark matter is an expression which generates mass. Thus, both mass and the speed of light, and we know that those two are linked by Einstein's famous equation, are fundamentally manifestations of the same energy. And this is precisely why I don't think the scientists will be able to isolate dark energy. It will stay isolated, but its influence may be detected in high energy particle physics experiments, such as the Hadron Collider at CERN in Switzerland. If dark energy and dark matter are correspondences to the etheric and physical planes of matter, suggestion, or the abstract and concrete mind, another suggestion, we can see the idea of inseparables. You cannot separate those two examples of the etheric and physical, lower mind and higher mind, and I don't think you can separate these two here. Dark matter is therefore the modification of the basic dark energy that is affected by gravity. And this is important because in section 4 of my diagrams, I've said there dark matter generates mass. It is the cosmic Saturnian principle. And what this means is it's tending towards matter. And Saturn, as an astrological influence, keeps us limited, confined. Our karma keeps us in a certain place until we do something. And it is towards the matter end. And there is something which tends towards the center, which is called centripetal force, pulling towards the center, and is in most of our lives for the first 2 rounds of Saturn, which take us up to about age of 59. And so I see cosmic Saturn as a consolidating, limiting centripetal principle. Dark energy, on the other hand, is the cosmic Uranian force, which is centrifugal, flying outward from the center and offering freedom. Freedom when we've gone through the taskmaster work of Saturn. We've built an integrated personality. We're ready for initiation or the touch of fire that comes with Uranus. And we're ready to be freed from the ring pass knot of Saturn, maybe after 59 years of age, when we have conformed to what Saturn wanted. We have to fulfill the law of Saturn in order to transcend it. And with that comes something very important, and that is the psychological acceptance of death. We have to, at this point, to be able to feel the freeing energy of Uranus and the centripetal principle, centrifugal principle here. We have to, because we have to accept that death is going to happen at some point physically, and use all our resources to help other people, not bent on survival, not bent on great insurance policies so we know that this can happen and that can happen to keep us better, etc. Survival and the need to survive is a dweller on the threshold principle that needs to be overcome. And if we can overcome our fear of death, and it's a real fear of death, when it's overcome, we're free. We're free to do whatever else. Physical death doesn't follow this. It could do, I suppose, but generally speaking, we're free to use the rest of our life. And I'll share with you, because you're all good friends. I don't know who you all are, but there's plenty of you here. I'll tell you what I asked and what I was told. I asked about this time of death in my own life, and they said, well, this is in deep meditation. If you ask the question in your spiritual diary, we'll tell you. And then the benefit of us telling us is that you will know how many years you've got to fit the rest of the work that you've got to do into your life. So I asked. Now, I'm not going to tell you what they told me. It's not as long as I would have perhaps wanted, but at least I know now the amount of time I've got to use, and use it without the fear of something that's going to happen anyway. And I would say you can do the same if you want to do that as well. Because there's nothing more frustrating than people I know who say, oh, I think I'm going to make old bones. I'll do that in 5 years' time. And then suddenly they pass. And they haven't done the things that they wanted to do because they always thought there was more time. Ponder on the thought that the Tibetan gave us. It's always later than we think. And it's probably a very good thought to ponder on. But I don't want to stray too much here, but I did want to make that point here and a little bit more about this idea of dark matter and dark energy. Without dark matter, there would be no coherent structure. We wouldn't have a universe that we would call the physical universe. But without dark energy, there would be no freedom from it. And so we come down into matter, all what the wisdom has taught us about, to experience, and then we free ourselves. But how many of us are genuinely ready for freedom, but we're being held back by our past lives and the energy and the heaviness emotionally and fear-wise of those past lives, which by atavism we bring into this lifetime as well. And so I've summarized what I wanted to talk about there with the last part of the sheet, where I've equated dark energy to the planet Uranus and the dark light of spirit and the monad in Shambhala. And at the bottom, I've equated the dark matter of Saturn, and Saturn, I've equated those two with form and personality. And to try to show in the bigger picture, I think that diagram is useful to see the personality at the bottom coin in that circle. And then we expand into the light with soul, but there is something further to expand to in Uranus. And if we can get to this point where we can get over the psychological fear of death, and we have been able to fulfill the requirements of Saturn, we've seen to our karma, and we're willing to give the rest of our lives to whatever we can give out through our hearts, to our groups, to our community, to our collective, whatever the principle is, we can be energized by Uranus. In other words, we will have climbed the mountain of karma and reached the top of the mountain of initiation. And there at the mountaintop, as did Jesus on the Mount of Olives, we can receive the blessing of a higher one. You know what was said, if we know our transfiguration on the Mount of Olives, we can receive our dark energy or our flash of light that can transform us into the true spiritual beings that we are, rather than the personalities that we've had to live with for so long. So I think I'd probably like to leave it at that point. Thank you.